Welcome back into First Draft. I am Field Yates, joined by ESPN NFL draft analysts Jordan Reid, Matt Miller. We're back for our, let's call it every 2 weeks cadence. Jordan, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. Can't complain at all. It's always a pleasure being here doing our podcast, and I'm excited about this one. This should be a fun one.
Yes, indeed. Jordan, we're going to keep you very busy as your new quarterback hot board is available now on ESPN.com. Matt, what's going on with you, my friend?
Everything's good here. I'm excited to rip apart Jordan's rankings instead of having to go through like a top 50 of mine or a mock draft. It's like, you know what?
That's nice, right?
Let's tear apart what Jordan's been doing. No, Jordan does a hell of a job, and I'm excited to talk about these quarterbacks.
We're going to dive into them in just a few moments, but we want to start with some news. As just, 3 or 4 days ago from the time of this conversation, the NFL informed all 32 teams that the college all-star games, the most prominent being the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine Game not too far behind as well, amongst others, would now allow underclassmen to take part in these all-star games. Previously, they had been reserved for players that had finished college careers already and had been seniors during their college careers. I know you guys wanted to talk a little bit about what this might mean for the future of these games. So, Jordan, I'll start with you. What did you make of this news from the NFL?
Yeah, it was something that had been a rumor for about a month now, and it wasn't something that I thought would come to fruition so early. I was surprised to see them actually make it eligible this year. So I think what is really unique about it is you kind of have to look at it from both sides of the equation. And I think it's brutal for later round seniors just because there's going to be so many juniors that do end up declaring, and they're going to maybe want to play in this all-star game to be showcased in front of all 32 teams. But also on the opposite end of the spectrum, I kind of was thinking Texan agents and then some people around the league. Let's say you're Caleb Williams, right? And you're just fed up with people talking about jumping into your mom's arms crying. And he's just like, screw it. I'm going to go down to the Senior Bowl and prove everybody wrong that I'm mentally tough. I can sling the ball, and I'm the consensus number 1 overall pick. So I think there's two sides of the equation that you have to look at it. It could be good for higher ranked players, but also I think it's absolutely brutal from some late round guys. Like, for example, let's say a couple years ago, we maybe never even hear of somebody like Quinn that comes from a Division III school. Now that we have such a big pool of different seniors and also adding the underclassmen. And so I kind of went back and forth about it. So there is a bunch of positives and negatives. It just depends on which end of the spectrum that you look at it from.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on that. I think even the day of the day 3 player is going to be few and far between because of transfer portal. I mean, if you're a good D3 player, you're getting pulled up. I live 5 miles from a pretty good MIAA school, and they're dealing with that constantly. If you're good, you're gone. And so I do think that's going to be an impact as well, guys. But I see this as we had 69 juniors declare for the draft last year. I believe that number is right, which is a lower number. But all those guys aren't going to the Shrine Game or the Senior Bowl. So I do think that we'll see the talent pool spread around. I think, and I wrote about this for our Monday morning draft notebook, this could really help a guy like JJ McCarthy. Like if you're quarterback 3 in this class, and let's say Caleb Williams and Drake Maye go the traditional route, and they're like, nah, I'm too good for the bowl games. I'll see you at the combine, or maybe I'll throw. For a JJ McCarthy or a Quinn Ewers, or pick your junior quarterback that you like, Carson Beck if he declares, go to one of these all-star games and you can improve your stock. I think we saw Baker Mayfield do that at the Senior Bowl, where everybody was like, oh my God, Josh Allen's a Mobile. Well, Baker Mayfield really started his climb that year to the number 1 pick spot. So I do think for those, mid to late first round guys, this could be a huge opportunity to make themselves some money.
Perhaps I shouldn't mention this, Matt, because I'm not sure all these quarterbacks have fared particularly well in the NFL, but big Senior Bowl weeks have included Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz, Mac Jones, all guys who saw their stock boost appreciably because of their time down in Mobile, whether they've panned out in the NFL
Hurts,
or not.
Dak Prescott, there were some good
there have been some others.
Guys,
Right. No, I'm talking about the guys. Guys that also, but I'm talking about guys that maybe went from likely first round picks to solidified their stance as, in the case of Daniel Jones, the number 1 quarterback drafted in his class. I think a couple of years ago with Mac Jones, is he a late first round pick? He ended up being a mid first round pick. But it'd be really interesting as well as it pertains to what the bowl games look like this year. I want to say Jim Nagy, who of course is the terrific director of the Senior Bowl, had announced a player invite like 5 minutes before Shefty broke the news about the fact that non-seniors were now eligible to play in the game. So I wonder just how far along in the process Jim and his team, plus the various other bowl games, had gotten in assembling or sort of guessing what their rosters are going to look like. There's going to be some audibles called, if you will, over the next few weeks here as those All-Star Game invites do go out. But our experience, the three of us that get to be selfish in this regard, have a much more compelling trip now down to the Senior Bowl because it's just going to be that much more talent-laden. Do we have to rename the Senior Bowl, by the way? Does it need to be named just the Reese's Bowl?
Yeah.
Yeah, or the Draft Bowl. I know
the Draft Bowl.
Big on the
work.
Draft starts in Mobile.
Just
call it the Draft
the Mobile Bowl.
Get in on
that
it
could work. Yeah. All right, so some news there. And by the way, before you know it, the deadline for juniors, or I should say underclassmen, to declare is going to come around the corner. We're getting into a fairly newsy portion of the calendar over the next 50 to 60 days. Of course, the final 50 or so days of the college football season is right here upon us. And again, Jordan writes the hot board. It goes up on ESPN.com. You update it every 2 to 3 weeks, Jordan?
Every 4 weeks.
Every 4 weeks. All right. I'm not much of a math major, but 4 weeks is the official time between hot board updates. And a new one is available, Jordan. If you've listened to this show in prior episodes that the three of us have done, we've gone through some of these quarterbacks in some level of depth. So what I was thinking about doing is, and I'll let each one of you chime in here, is just at the top of the board, quick assessment. If there's something dramatic that's changed, you can make note of it, but we don't need a deep dive into Caleb Williams or Drake Maye. They've been 1 and 2 on your board since jump. And then I might ask you about a couple of guys that all of a sudden are either seeing their stock rise, seeing their stock fall, or have perhaps come a little bit more off the radar than the guys that have been there the entire time. Does that work for you guys?
That sounds absolutely great. You don't want
to
do a deep dive into Caleb Williams' time in the pocket today?
No, we you know what, Matt? We'll
save that.
We'll save that one for another. There will be a lot of Caleb Williams talk over the next 5.5 months. That much is for sure. So Caleb remains number one. Jordan and Matt, is there anything that you need to get off your chest here about Caleb Williams that you feel like the world deserves to hear that you haven't previously said publicly?
I would just say don't panic. I would just say don't panic. I think we're in a spot where everyone is over-evaluating every throw Caleb Williams makes. And there's some flaws to his game. Absolutely. But don't panic. Don't over-evaluate. Take the big picture. I think C.J. Stroud is teaching us that lesson weekly in the NFL right now. Just remember to evaluate the big picture and not hyper-fixate on every throw.
Yeah, and I call this not draft fatigue, but once a player is draft eligible, especially a quarterback, it's just like we poke so many holes in them. And Caleb has his holes in his warts, rightfully so, but a lot of people hype these guys up their freshman or sophomore years, and miraculously, when they become draft eligible, it's like, oh man, we're starting to panic about a bunch of this stuff. Yeah, it happened with Trevor Lawrence. It happened with a lot of different quarterbacks throughout the pre-draft process. And I talked about this a little bit last week on College Football Live, and that it seems to kind of be trending that Caleb Williams and Drake Maye is 1A and 1B, depending on who you talk to. And there are some people that actually prefer Drake Maye, whether we agree with it or not. They are considered 1A and 1B. So I think this quarterback one race is going to be really interesting going down the backstretch of this season and also during the pre-draft process too. And then going back to the point made about the All-Star game, what if Drake Maye goes down and plays at the Draft Bowl and Caleb Williams elects not to play? So draft eligible players being able to play in the Senior Bowl, quote unquote Senior Bowl, is now it's going to be a little bit spicy, man. I'm really interested to see how this angle does play out, especially throwing a wrench in everything. Drake Maye goes down and plays in the Senior Bowl. What does Caleb Williams end up doing?
Sure.
Remember, Justin Herbert went to the Senior Bowl that year. It was Joe Burrow who was going first, but Tua was in there and couldn't go. Remember, all the talk was Herbert's going to go prove he's the guy. And obviously, he ended up being the third quarterback drafted, still a top 6 pick, but there's some precedent for that, Jordan.
So number 3 on your board, your big board, Jordan, is Shedeur Sanders, who's just an incredible talent. The reason why we can kind of move past this one is 2 reasons, I guess. 1, he's been there. He's been your number 3 guy in prior editions of the QB Hot Board. And 2, I know that the deadline is still some 50 to 60 odd days away, but God, it sure feels like Shedeur Sanders is bound for one more year at Colorado. Of course, I think Deion's actually kind of acknowledged that publicly, so I think we can probably save most of our Shedeur thoughts for either if he does in the unlikely event to declare, or We'll be talking about him a ton for the 2025 draft. Certainly would be amongst the best players available if he decides to stay around for one more season. So let's move past him to J.J. McCarthy. And the probably most difficult quarterback to evaluate so far this season is J.J. McCarthy. Last week was supposed to be the week. This past Saturday was supposed to be the week in which it all started. The evaluation started for J.J. McCarthy. Because he finally played a good team. He completed 7 of 8 passes on Saturday against Penn State, Jordan. They ran the ball 26 straight times to finish the game, did Michigan. Have we learned enough about J.J. McCarthy where you feel like that quarterback 4 ranking is pretty firm, or is he kind of flimsily holding on to that spot because he's still kind of a mystery?
I think it's a little bit fluid and flimsy, honestly, just because whatever questions you had about JJ going into the game against Penn State, you had the same exact questions coming out of the game. They finished the game with 32 straight run plays, and that's including the 2 kneel downs to end the game. But I think it's more
32,
so of them.
26. Again, math is not my strength, people. Just a reminder there. Yeah.
You're fine. You're fine. It was a ton of runs. Let's just leave it at that. No pass attempts in the second half, and there was one that was negated by a pass interference penalty, but whatever questions you had about JJ going into the game, you have the same questions exiting that game, just because I respect Sharon more and I love everything that he did in that game. He understood that his offensive line, specifically his right tackle, was just getting demoralized. Chop Robinson, they were just taking turns on him. So he said, let's just condense everything and let's just run the ball at the speed that they do have. So I don't think it's necessarily a knock against JJ, just because he's had plenty of games of where he's had over 25 or 30 passing attempts. But once again, we still haven't seen him against a high-quality opponent going against what I like to call a negative script of where he has to pass the ball since the college football playoffs. So there's a lot weighing on that Ohio State game here coming up in a couple of weeks, but I am a bit disappointed in that we still have the same questions exiting that game as we had entering the game about J.J. McCarthy.
If you liked JJ headed into the game, you still like him. And you say, hey, they only let him throw the ball 8 times. He completed 7 of them. It's not like, he was the problem and they stopped throwing the ball because of it. Like Jordan said, it was the offensive line was the problem. You've got a head coach who got suspended when the plane landed. And so it's like you want to go, kind of mistake-free football. I still like JJ. I think he was my quarterback 3 or 4 when the season began. He is, if you take Shedeur out of the equation, he's my quarterback 3. I just think he's efficient. He's smart. He's really tough. We saw that what he did as a runner in the second half against Penn State should get you excited. I know he didn't throw the ball a lot, but what he was able to do as a runner, he dings his ankle up, it comes right back in the next series. He's just a really tough player who I think you go back the week before, they threw the ball like 37 times. So there will be enough. I think when we have that total picture, if he does declare, and everything I've heard says he will declare for the draft, we'll have that total picture of, 12, 13 games this year to look at third down throws and what he's done under pressure and those things that really matter. But I don't think 8 throws against Penn State says, oh man, we got to rush to move J.J. McCarthy down the board or anything.
Yeah, and if Michigan keeps playing the way that they have, they've got 4 more games ahead of them, right? 2 more in the regular season. I guess 5, actually. The Big Ten championship game, whoever that would be against, plus potentially 2 college playoff games. So there should be stiffer competition for him, Jordan, down the road here.
I was going to say, Phil, like if there was one guy that I would have circled that needs to play in the All-Star game, I definitely think it would be him, just because you want to see him outside of that Michigan offense. We know Harbaugh and that staff, they want to run the football. Like that is Jim Harbaugh's identity. They have 2 really good backs in Corum and Edwards, but wouldn't it just be great to see JJ participate in 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 just to put him in those game-like situations, just because we're not really going to get some of that stuff with some of the opponents that he's playing outside of 2 games, assuming they play or they make the college football playoff. So we'll be able to see him against 3 quality opponents. But I just would love to see him at an All-Star game where we're seeing the best of the best, not only seniors, but now underclassmen as well. I think the Senior Bowl could definitely shine a little bit more light on what he is as a prospect.
All right, so here's where it gets fun. Quarterback 5, because I don't know that there's necessarily consensus amongst the top 4, but we've been talking about those 4 guys for a long time. And then all of a sudden, not necessarily unfamiliar names, but perhaps less familiar names are here on the quarterback hot board. Number 5 is Carson Beck. I think we think of Georgia all the time, Jordan, and think they're just, a first-round defense and then, nasty offensive linemen and great receivers and, NFL-level running backs. But what has impressed you about Carson Beck? Like, he has been a fast riser up boards this season.
Yeah, so as I've been charting him and just watching him this season, it's like, man, it's like he just continuously gets better and better and better every single game. We saw it against Ole Miss this past weekend of where they've completely rolled out the game plan with him, and they trust him to make so many different types of throws. He throws from a balanced platform. He's a very good runner. But the thing that he's so good at is that he's so clean getting through his progressions. Like, he doesn't make any mistakes when he does throw the football. So I think with Carson Beck, it's more so the foundation that you're excited about. Yes, he does only have 10 starts now to his credit, which is a little bit alarming, especially when you're talking about a one-year starter. We've seen how debatable that is in the past, even going back to Anthony Richardson last year, of where you want to see guys get a little bit more starts. But the foundation is so promising with him. And I don't know if we're going to see him this year, but if we do, I think he would be one to keep an eye on as far as him rising throughout the process, just based on what we have seen so far this season in his 1 year as a starter.
Yeah, I think you shuffle him to 25. I've already done it. I've taken him and Shedeur Sanders and just cut, paste, put him in the 2025 tab. I don't think we're going to see him. I'll jump on that. They're conservative. Like, they are throwing the ball 30 times a game, which is maybe a little bit new for Georgia. It's still very conservative, so his numbers aren't going to blow you away. But what he's done since Brock Bowers went out has been really impressive. You get McCarthy back, a little bit injured early in the year. Brock Bowers goes down, and it's like he has not lost anything, losing his most dependable receiver over the middle of the field. So I think the Kentucky game was kind of the coming out party where people took notice of, like, hey, this dude is for real. He can sling it as well as anyone. And he's got NFL body type, NFL athleticism. So I've heard starter grades on him, but it does sound like he'll be back at Georgia next year, much to the chagrin of everyone in the SEC, because they in-house recruit so well at Georgia. It feels like they're always, like Nolan Smith and those guys. Oh, they came out to be first-round picks. No, I'm going to go back to school for a year. It sounds like they've done the same thing here with Beck.
All right, well, here's some good news for SEC defensive coordinators. Jayden Daniels can't come back next year. He's exhausted all of his eligibility, has played a ton of football. So the opposite end of the spectrum from Carson Beck is a guy who graduated already from Arizona State, did that in 3 years, went to LSU to get his master's. And Jordan, in terms of like single game moments, this past weekend was one of the most impressive from any player as Jayden Daniels put LSU's offense on his back. He is firmly in the mix for, well, you know what? I'm no Stanford Steve with the Heisman Trophy sort of like, front runners, et cetera, et cetera. But he's been awesome. He at least deserves to be in that conversation in my boat. But what kind of NFL prospects are there for the LSU starter?
Well, he's the one that is steadily rising. And like, if you would have told me that this was the same guy that we saw at Arizona State, I would have laughed at you. Like, he's improved so much. And the big worry about Daniels even coming into the season was that he just leaves the pocket prematurely. He didn't have any pocket patience, and then the accuracy was all over the place. And then you combine that with the slender frame as well. And he's a little bit chaotic as a runner too. Like, he just takes some massive hits, so he needs to learn to protect himself. But Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., two players that are also surging up boards as well, he just created so much chemistry with him. Like, the deep accuracy is outstanding. He has so much more pocket patience. His progressions are really good. They're clean, but he's so dangerous as a runner. We saw it last week against Florida, of where like he looked like Lamar Jackson out there. Like, he was just slicing them. He was slicing them. And it was so amazing to watch him play, just because he was so in sync and he's in rhythm. So with him and JJ McCarthy, I think that quarterback 3 spot is going to be really interesting. Like, I think he could get that high. And there's a lot of people that really like Jayden Daniels. And similar to Bo Nix, you kind of have to wash your hands and your memory as far as what they were from their last stop. With Bo Nix being at Auburn, and then now Jayden going away from Arizona State at LSU. Like, these are completely different players. They're completely different. And the transfer portal has really helped them. So I'm really intrigued with Jayden Daniels. And it wouldn't surprise me, like, top end of the second round, that would not surprise me at all. Like, I've heard those type of grades for him.
Yeah, let's remember, he's only 22. I know, like Field mentioned, he was at Arizona State, did 3 years there. He's still relatively young. Like, this is not Stetson Bennett, who, is old enough to rent a car and is entering the draft. So I think Jayden, no one is playing better at the quarterback position right now in college than Jayden Daniels. So take that for what it's worth as you evaluate him as a draft prospect. I think there's going to be questions of, like, why did it take him so long for this to click? Is he boosted by those 2 amazing receivers they have? And those are all fair questions that we're going to have to break down in February and March and early April. But man, what he's doing right now is special. And the deep ball is just electric. I mean, the connection that he has with Brian Thomas Jr. on the outside is crazy. And I think what I've seen best, the pocket presence, even from week 1 this year, the pocket presence for Jayden Daniels has just gotten so much better, much more patient, much more poised. And as you guys said, when he wants to pull it down and run, like, good luck. There's no stopping that guy. And I'm like, I'll throw this, but even when like Justin Fields and those guys were coming out, my thought process was, if you're going to have to develop as a quarterback, and everyone does basically, why not go for the guy who's just super athletic, that is going to make you pay with his legs? And Jayden has the deep ball. He's got the running ability. Like, I would be more prone to go that way as opposed to, some of the other people we talk about as round 2 quarterbacks.
I've been thinking about some of the quarterbacks in recent years that have failed. And one of the themes amongst them is the quarterbacks that have no support along the offensive line. And you have to be more than just mobile to make up for a bad offensive line. You have to have pocket presence that both of you guys have mentioned with Jayden. And it really has popped up in recent games. He knows that very fine line between, like, when I can tuck and run and when I can buy myself one extra second and find one of those incredible receivers. By the way, Jason Taylor's son, put that guy in the bookmark folder for 2025 or 20, whatever year he is eligible. That might be the next, I don't know about Brock Bowers, but a first-round tight end, if I've ever seen one, who's only a true sophomore at LSU. You mentioned a minute ago, Matt, that the best quarterback in terms of play right now in the country is Jayden Daniels. Washington fans, Oregon fans are going to be pissed to hear that one, Jordan.
Yeah.
They're coming.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do those two in the same conversation, Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., not because they're similar. They're very dissimilar as players, but because they play in the same conference and because maybe those two are considered the Heisman frontrunners right now. They're 7 and 8 on your board. What's the latest? Anything you haven't covered previously on those two that you want to mention now?
Well, with Penix, I think of all the quarterbacks, specifically the seniors, there's been the most mixed opinions with him. I will say that just because of the offense that he's in. And then you combine that with the medicals too as well. But I mean, he's putting up numbers in the offense. He's shown decent accuracy, I would say. He's throwing to some dudes on the perimeter, Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillian, Jalen Polk as well. I think it's the best trio of wide receivers in the country right now. Nobody's playing as good as those guys. So I think with Penix, he's going to have a lot of varying opinions about him. Once again, another guy that I would love to see at the Senior Bowl outside of that offense as well, just because it's fireworks. Like, how does he play within the short to intermediate areas? Is he accurate enough to hit balls in those areas too? So he's one I would love to see outside of that offense. And then with Bo Nix, they couldn't be different as far as their playing style. Bo Nix is that player that makes you pay with those leverage reads, that quick game, those quick perimeter screens, and then he's timely with those deep shots down the field. Troy Franklin is another player that's having a breakout year too. They've grown together and developed some really good chemistry. So vastly different, but once again, two players that I think are going to have a lot of mixed opinions and different variants of opinions as well as far as their draft stock moving forward.
Anything on those two, Matt?
Yeah, I'm a Bo Nix guy, which I can't believe I'm saying. If I could go back in time and remember what I said when he was at Auburn, the fact that we're here says a lot about Bo Nix's growth as a player. But I do think, like, the way that he executes, the efficiency, the accuracy, the timing, like, that's probably not ready to put a round 1 grade on him. But I think he's going to be comparable for me to Will Levis, who was like an early round 2 player for me. That's right where he got drafted. I don't know that Bo's quite that athletic, but I think a similar type of grade and someone who's just, again, everything you hear about him is fantastic. And he has a cleaner injury history. That's my biggest thing with Michael Penix. Like, the release is a little bit slow as he's a lefty, which probably throws that off a little bit too. It is kind of a 1-2 throw it deep at times, but it's just the injury history is so hard to get past with him. And I've said on here before, I'm kind of hedging until we get some of the medicals back on him to know, you got 2 shoulder injuries, 2 knee injuries. That's a lot to put on a 22-year-old.
Yeah, they don't have the IR.
Can I ask you this though, Matt? Now that he's been healthy for 2 years now, does that mean anything in your evaluation?
That helps. No, it absolutely helps. And especially like ACL, we're seeing guys pop back in 9 months from those, but it's more the shoulder for me. The shoulder, the clavicle is where, like, I'm not a doctor. I will never pretend to be that, but just want to hear, like, hey, is this something that's going to hold up? We've all heard of players who, Nick Chubb was famously the one where they're like, this guy will never be able to play in the NFL, and he's one of the best running backs in the league now. So you have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but just that, how do the doctors see the shoulder? Is it going to hold up over time? And, I think we see now, guys, just, he's not the biggest dude. This isn't a Justin Herbert sized guy. So can he handle the wear and tear a little bit too?
I want to ask you about one more, Jordan, and then I'm going to mention the final 5 on your board, kind of in a cluster, because I think the drop-off takes place after this next quarterback. It's Quinn Ewers from Texas, back in the fold after missing some time due to injury himself. he feels like a guy who has a lot to earn over these next 4 or 5 games potentially for the Longhorns.
He's one that, like, I haven't went more back and forth on a quarterback this year than Quinn Ewers. Like, he was my quarterback 4 on the previous hot board, and then he got hurt. And then he just saw some inconsistencies as well. But I think Quinn is very accurate, but I just want to see a little bit more urgency with him. That's been my biggest gripe with him. And then just the deep ball accuracy. I'm really concerned about his deep ball accuracy. That's just my biggest worry with him. But in the short to intermediate areas, I think he has really good accuracy. But I just want to see him be a little bit more consistent. He's prone to getting off the slow starts. And then just the inconsistency with the ball placement and then the deep accuracy. Like I said, that's something that's just really, really concerning with me. But like I said, I haven't went more back and forth on a quarterback than Quinn Ewers, and I'm still really trying to figure him out.
Yeah, I mean, he could go anywhere from middle of round 1 to round 3. And I think right now we're trying to figure out who this guy is. He's 20 years old. He's missed significant time each of his 2 seasons as a starter. And the decision-making at times, there might be 20 throws a game where you're like, damn, this kid, he's going top 15. Like, he looks amazing. And then there's 3 throws a game where you're like, what? Why? Like, what? Why are you doing these things? So I think that's just some of the maturity at the position that shows up. Like, his lack of experience really shows up at times, even though he's a junior. He didn't play that first year at Ohio State, was hurt for a significant period after the Alabama hit last year, missed 2 games this year. So it shows up at times. And his supporting cast is too good for some of the mistakes that he makes. And that's the hard part, of evaluating him, as you see those flashes that are so talented and special, but then you see the poor decision-making. So I'm with you. I mean, Texas has to win out. Like, every game is huge for them at this point. TCU gave them everything they had in the second half. Texas Tech is playing super tough right now, even though they're not, a great team all around. So there's going to be some good tests, if they can, get past the Big 12 championship game and into the playoff. Maybe there'd be an expanded window to look at him. But I think Ewers is, like we talked about, J. McCarthy being able to benefit from this junior rule. Ewers is next in that list. If he does declare, and I don't think anyone knows right now if he's going to or not, if he does declare, like, this guy has to be throwing every opportunity he gets, basically.
If he doesn't declare and we have an Arch Manning controversy next year, are you really going to not allow Arch
Malik
to
Murphy?
over?
We might have a Malik Murphy.
That could be it too. Yeah.
And I just wanted to add this, Phil. Like, the Oklahoma game was a snapshot of him as a prospect. Like, he goes out and he throws 2 early picks, and then he goes out and he threw 20 straight completions.
Yeah, he was
like that's a snapshot. But I'll also add this: with Jonathan Brooks now being out, I think that's going to put a little bit more heavy lifting on his shoulders too. So we're going to get a good feel for him down the backstretch as well.
Yeah, Jonathan Brooks, Texas running back, who I think all of us had as at least our second best running back, if not number 1 on each of our boards, has been diagnosed with a torn ACL. He's out for the season, obviously. That could impact his decision to declare for the 2024 NFL Draft. We'll find out there. Certainly feel terrible for the kid because he was playing lights out this season. Yep. All right, so the final 5 on Jordan's board: Michael Pratt from Tulane, who is headed to the Senior/Draft Bowl; Spencer Rattler from South Carolina; Jordan Travis; Cam Ward from Washington State; and Sam Hartman from Notre Dame via Wake Forest. Is there one on that list, Jordan, that you think has the most upside out of the 5, or do you feel like all these guys are probably destined to be career backups?
Well, I wouldn't say he has the most upside, but the one that I would feel the most comfortable drafting is Michael Pratt of Tulane. I really like what he's been able to show this year. He's that Kirk Cousins type that could go in round 4 somewhere of where he ends up being a starter. And he was a little bit banged up early on this year. He had a phenomenal game against South Alabama, started off at like 14 or 15, and ended up having a fumble early on in that game too. So that messed up some of the things that he was able to do. But the one game and the one opportunity that I hate he missed was against Ole Miss. He had a big, what I call, resume game of where everybody had circled for him against Ole Miss, but he unfortunately missed that game. But of one player that I would feel comfortable with taking out this group in like the 4th or the 5th round, I think Pratt would be the one that I would feel the most comfortable with.
Yeah, I think my comp for him right now is Taylor Heineke. So, like, to give you, if you haven't watched Tulane play, which you should because they're good, I would take Jordan Travis, though. And again, like I said earlier, I would like navigate or go more toward the guys who are athletic, like just someone who can make plays. And Jordan Travis makes plays. I mean, no, he is not the biggest guy. I think there's some, arm strength flaws at times, but gosh, he's just a playmaker. And so if it's late in the draft, like, give me the playmaker, give me the guy who won a ton of games in college, someone who understands his supporting cast, knows how to get the ball out to his weapons, and just continues to win.
Go check out the entire quarterback hot board. It is available right now on ESPN.com. Great stuff there from Jordan. Let's pivot and wrap the show up with a segment on players who have the most to gain the rest of the season. So we can each dive in and offer up one or two. Matt, I'll start with you. Who do you think has the most to gain in what we'll call the final third of this college football regular season?
Gosh, I know we've talked a lot about him already today, but J.J. McCarthy is that guy. And not just because of the questions like, we wanted that breakout resume game, as Jordan said. You want that against Penn State, didn't get it. Hopefully we get it against Ohio State. But I think that's also let's look at the draft order right now. We've got so many teams that need quarterbacks. Feels like the Bears are going to have the first pick. Feels like the Giants are right there with the second pick. Kyler Murray looked really good for the Cardinals in his return. But the New England Patriots have to figure out a quarterback spot. And the list goes on. The Atlanta Falcons. There's so many teams that need a quarterback. And it's like we're desperate for that QB3 this year. And McCarthy has a ton to gain. So the spotlight's going to be on him in a huge way, not because he has to overcome any negative play. There just hasn't been a huge, sample size of him throwing the ball downfield. So I think this is a huge opportunity for him over the next month and a half to maybe put his flag in the ground as that QB3. And I have him at 15 overall right now. So maybe he can even, actually get into that top 10 conversation for us all.
What do you think, Jordan?
I'm going to go with Georgia offensive tackle Amarius Mims.
That's a good one.
He just returned from injury last week against Ole Miss, and they spot played him a little bit. He played every other series, and he looked good for the most part. But the one game I have circled is the SEC title game. They are already scheduled to play Alabama. Him against Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell, a player that's had a breakout season this year. So Amarius Mims has a lot to gain down the backstretch of this year, and I think his reps are going to increase as he distances himself from that tightrope surgery that he had on his ankle. So he has a lot to gain, and he's in that mix. He's kind of in that second tier along with Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu are in that tier one by their lonesome, in my opinion. But he's in that second tier of offensive tackles. That is a very, very deep group right now.
I'll go to the same
and they're
team.
all right tackles. That's what's crazy. Yeah. They're all right tackles.
Well, a couple of them. Yeah.
It's like that tier two's all right tackles.
Yeah. Which that position has seen its value rise a ton over the past couple of years here. I'll pick the same team and a teammate coming off of the same surgery who's been playing for a while now, Ladd McConkey. Was he also tightrope? Obviously, Brock Bowers was tightrope. I think Ladd might have been. Was he ACL? Anyways, whatever. That's not important right now. But Ladd has been back for a handful of games now. And there's a handful of games more potentially for Georgia. And along the lines of what you guys have been discussing, it's not that Ladd hasn't shown what he can be. It's that the further you get into the season and the stiffer the competition and the more that you produce, the more it opens our eyes to, have we just not been paying enough attention to this guy? And in a very, very deep wide receiver class, Ladd McConkey has a chance, I think, to emerge as a legitimate first-round pick, especially once we get to the pre-draft process and we see just how fast he runs. But the NFL is going to always defer to the 6'2", 225-pound wide receiver who can run the 4.40. Ladd's not going to be that big. He's definitely not going to be that heavy. But he might run that fast. And I think that one thing that we are realizing now in the NFL with some recent hits like Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Justin Jefferson, who I know he's a hard guy to compare anybody to, but none of those guys, if you met them on the street, are going to wow you as oh my God, that guy's 6'4", 225 pounds. He could be a defensive end if he weren't a wide receiver. And McConkey is not going to blow you away with his sort of physical stature, but that dude has been awesome. And if you're looking at just simply route running ability, he's on the very short list for the best in this entire class. A lot of wide receivers can make themselves some money over the last month or so of this college football season. Anybody else that either of you wants to mention that you have to get off your chest amongst a player that could see a stock go up or down depending on how the last few weeks unfold?
I could go on and on. I have a long list. Two corners I would love to add, both in the SEC. Tyrion Arnold at Alabama, then also great, Kamari Lassiter at Georgia. There's some optimism. He may be the best corner at Alabama, and I still have Kool-Aid McKinstry graded higher than Tyrion Arnold. But Arnold he's been phenomenal this year. That's the best way that I can put it. And Lassiter has also been a breakout candidate too.
Yeah, I'll throw two more out there. We'll stay SEC. Enos Rakestraw in Missouri, who had a fantastic game this past week. Mizzou is quietly really good. I don't know why they're not getting more love, but Enos Rakestraw, super athletic, really fun player. And then at LSU, Malik Neighbors is the yak god of this class. Like Brian Thomas Jr. is the touchdown machine. His length and ability to adjust on deep balls is beautiful. So those are two guys who maybe get overshadowed a little bit by some peers in the conference, but I think they're both first rounders.
There's going to be some guys that are going to be like, 6th or 7th at their respective position in our rankings going into the draft. But at certain positions, that might very well be like a solid first-round pick this year, right? The 6th or 7th wide receiver, the 6th best quarterback. And we're talking about Jayden Daniels maybe being the 6th best quarterback. He could go top of the second round, late in the first. That just seems to be how the NFL draft tends to go, right? If you're going to take a guy in the top of the second, you might as well get that extra year of contract control at the back end of the first. The 6th or 7th offensive tackle is going to be a really good player. So this is a year where, depending on the position you play, you may feel like we are slighting you, but we really aren't. There's just a lot of depth at that position relative to others in this upcoming draft. As always, go check out these gentlemen's work all over social media, X, Instagram, you name it. Quarterback Hotboard is available. Matt, what is the next thing coming around the corner for you that you want to plug?
Man, I actually think I have a mock draft coming out pretty soon.
Let's go. Let's go.
So that we'll rip that to shreds when it comes out. Don't worry, I'll be ready for it.
I already hate it.
Yeah, we did team needs recently, Jordan. That should be coming out soon. I know we're doing like a consensus mock draft. There's just it's heating up. The editors are keeping us busy. It's heating up. So
we got to call
that refresh button.
2:30, I think, tomorrow to discuss our consensus top 10. So keep your eyes out for that one. It should be on .com in the next week, maybe 2 weeks or so. Our editors are probably furious right now that we've revealed all of this upcoming content. All right, for Matt Miller and Jordan Reid, I am Field Yates. We'll see you guys again probably in a couple weeks or so here on First Draft.